Hey everyone, I hope you're well. This is the story about what if Naruto was a silent prodigy and joined Akatsuki. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well. So without any further ado, let's start the what if. Another day, another forest. Naruto was getting tired of this. He hadn't joined the Akatsuki to roam around forests. You know you're not yet a part of Akatsuki, right? Shut up. I have not spoken for a whole month, you heartless jerk. Really? I never noticed. That's because you were so busy socializing with Mr. Orange Mask. Well, he is fun to talk to. Don't you think he's a bit fishy? What? Why would you say that? Never mind. Naruto tried to make Kurama explain, but Kurama never responded. He then decided to forget it. The old fox must be seeking attention anyways. But he did keep a close eye on Toby from then on. But then, he reached the conclusion that Kurama was spouting bullshit. There was absolutely nothing strange about Toby. He was as stupid as Sakura. Wait, maybe a bit less. He scoffed as he thought. Deidara was sitting under a tree, beside Toby, their hands woven in a sign. Naruto, with his raised brows and pouty lips, wailed over to them and shook his hands in front of their faces. No response. They must have entered the meeting or whatever. Naruto was very interested in knowing the jutsu behind this, but he doubted anyone would tell him. So he chose his own tree not far from them and sat down. He rested a leg on his bent knee and folded his hands behind his head, going off to sleep. Several forms flickered in a cave, with their wavering forms and glitching. The man in the center had purple eyes and was the leader. So what's today's agenda? A cocky voice spoke up. Deidara groaned mentally, Hiden. What is Orochimaru up to? The leader spoke to a man with red eyes, and ignored Hiden completely. The man's eyes were not only red but also had small black comma shapes. It was undoubtedly the Sharingan. The visual prowess that fascinated Deidara belonged to none other than Itachi Uchiha, a rogue from Konoha. Hiden huffed but said nothing, and Itachi replied solemnly, We are still looking. The leader nodded, and turned to Deidara. Deidara took this opportunity and spoke up, There's this kid who wants to join. All members seemed to widen their eyes in shock, except the leader and his partner, and Hiden. Hiden straight up gasped, Huh? Deidara rolled his eyes, Yeah. The leader cut him in between, We recruit members ourselves. He spoke only one line, but he was clear, We look for people, people aren't supposed to look for us. Deidara agreed, but he had to tell the leader that Naruto was actually quite capable. He opened his mouth to speak, but realized that proclaiming his defeat in front of other members was maybe not the brightest idea. Deidara trailed off awkwardly. Seeing his senpai in distress, Toby seized the opportunity to help him. Yes. That kid is exceptionally talented. He even defeated Deidara. Isn't that right? He is very strong. Toby proclaimed. Their eyes were wide and eyebrows high, but no one else except Hiden poked fun at the blonde. What? Deidara got defeated? Is that right, Deidara? Didn't you always say you were undefeated? Ha. Hiden laughed and even seemed to wipe away tears, making Deidara flush red. Luckily, no one saw that. He was going to beat up Toby. After hearing Toby's words, the leader seemed to reconsider. Who is he? He asked. Deidara cleared his throat, His name's Naruto. From the corner of his eye, he thought he saw Itachi flinch, but when he glanced at him, there was no change in his posture whatsoever. He turned to the leader again. The man with purple eyes seemed to be contemplating the situation and after some time spoke up. Bring him here. Let's see. That was his final decision on this, and Deidara nodded once. After that, the discussion consisted of nothing other than recounting their missions and how Orochimaru had become really good at hiding. What a snake. Kasama had sneered. After the discussion was over, Toby and Deidara opened their eyes. Back at the forest, the crescent moon high up in the sky. Naruto woke up at night to a thrilling sight. Toby was hung upside down from a tree and had several small spiders jumping below, trying to reach him. However, as soon as they made contacts with him, they ost right to guff. Deidara was also casually kicking him, yelling stuff like dipshit, shitstick, jerk, stupid rascal, etc. It was quite amusing, and instead of getting up, Naruto made himself more comfortable under the tree. He watched as the two fought amongst themselves, wondering what exactly was the criterion to enter this weird group. Though Naruto hasn't made any noise since waking up, Toby noticed him and yelled for help. Naruto, save him! Deidara whipped his head towards the blonde and stopped kicking Toby. Oh yeah, by the way, the leader wants to meet you, he told him. He was expecting Naruto to be surprised or maybe even glad, but he just groaned. Deidara shot him a look. What? Is your ass too big to move? Now this surprised Naruto. Deidara seemed to be in a bad mood for some reason, and Naruto thus held up his palms in protest, not wanting to further instigate him. Oh no. That's absolutely not the case. It's just, do we have to travel in forests for months again? Naruto tried looking as apologetic as he could, lest Deidara switch his position with Toby. Deidara squinted his eyes at him, and raised a palm to the rope that hung Toby. He untied the knot and Toby fell rather loudly on the forest floor. His cries completely ruined the ambience of a moonlit forest, and that was a shame. Deidara stood there imposingly, hands on hip, and huffed out a breath. Do you think you can just shoosh in to the location? Do you think we are that dumb? To keep our location in a position that anyone could swoosh into? So much for being smart. Naruto raised his brows but didn't retort back. Right now he was doing his best to maintain a friendly relationship with these two, and would certainly not risk damaging it. Even though he had beaten Deidara quite easily, Deidara didn't let that affect him at all, and continued bossing his other two companions around. Not that Naruto minded actually. It was all mundane tasks and just him yelling, nothing out of the blue. Okay, chill. Let's go then. Naruto asked politely, but sweat dropped after hearing Deidara's reply. You asshat, we need to sleep and rest too. This jutsu takes up quite a bit of chakra. With that they all proceeded to sleep. Except Naruto. He already wasn't someone who slept easily, especially at night. In fact, he had always tried avoiding sleeping, because for him it came with nightmares. For some reason this was only the case at night, and naps during the day were silent and peaceful. So he got up, dusted his pants, and roamed around for a while. Finding nothing interesting, he went back to the place where the other two were sleeping, and returned to his place beneath the tree. Next morning, the trio departed, and this time they chose a path with almost no village in between. Naruto walked behind the two, staring at their backs. And a random question popped up in his mind. Hey, how come when you were beating Toby, he didn't just, go through the rope? Like he did with the spiders? Deidara and Toby stopped for a second and Deidara spoke up, some questions are better left unanswered. After a very uneventful week, they reached a mountainous region. There was a valley which was rather unimpressive, except for the very deep river that passed through it. All around was dense forest. Deidara took the initiative and jumped down. He stepped lightly over the water surface and stood over it. Naruto and Toby followed suit. After this they continued their journey under the hot sun, but on water. It was extremely humid, and Naruto was dripping with sweat. Why can't we just go through the forest? He asked, taking off his jacket and wrapping it around his waist. Because it's not safe, Deidara said. Naruto understood. There must be some kind of genjutsu over the river that made it safer for travel. Maybe this was in some other land's territory. Naruto couldn't tell. He wiped off the sweat and even removed the headband and tucked it away. He bent down to cup some water, but found it way too hot. He got up, annoyed, and ran his hand through his hair. What a pain. Toby and Deidara weren't even talking. This was the most boring situation in this whole stupid journey. He rubbed his hand over his stomach, and realized how battered his shirt was. It seemed like he had been through a battle and only made it out after being trampled upon. He wondered how the Akatsuki could still wear those robes in such sweltering heat. Kurama, talk to me. Yeah, no. Whyyyy. Naruto whined mentally. Where are we? How am I supposed to know? Come on. You know everything. All I can say is that there is heavy genjutsu here. Messes up your sense of direction. Kurama. You should probably get ready. For a fight. Don't tell me you thought getting into this terrorist group would be so easy. Yeah. Of course, I didn't think that. I knew something like this would happen. So what do you plan on doing? Shadow, clones? Rasengan? My katana? You'll do me dash? Kurama, no. I meant I could use your help. God. Kurama snickered and went back to sleep. Naruto groaned and looked up. They seemed to have stopped. He walked over to them. They stood in front of a huge boulder in one side of the rock wall that the river flowed through. Naruto stepped forward, but stopped as the boulder began rumbling. Slowly, it slid open and the trio entered. With a loud noise, the boulder shut, engulfing them in complete darkness. Naruto was about to ask, but paused as he felt two chakras appear. He squinted his eyes, but just then, small fires ignited around them, fluttering in the air but providing sufficient light. He thought it was someone with fire affinity, but noticed that it was small paper butterflies on fire flying around. A beautiful but slightly weird sight. Two figures approached him. Deidara and Toby stood at the side. A man with orange hair, nose piercings and purple ringed eyes along with a woman with purple hair. She was quite beautiful, Naruto noted. Though he realized that maybe this time and place wasn't the tight one to think of such things. So you are Naruto? The orange hair guy asked, his voice deep. Yeah. Naruto responded, unsure why he would ask such an obvious question. He was going to ask who they were when, on an instinct, he flipped to his right. A paper kunai passed by, slightly grazing his cheek. What the hell? Naruto shouted. It was more out of shock than anger. He saw the paper kunai embed itself on a stone wall behind Mr. Orange Hair. What in the world? You have good instincts at least. The man said and then motioned between the lady and Naruto. Let's see if you can even touch her once. He had barely registered what Mr. Orange Hair said when several paper kunais were thrown his way. It wasn't very effective as even though he wasn't focused, his instincts were enough to guide him. He noted that the lady hadn't even moved from her spot, and seemed to use paper infused with chakra. He saw a small purple flower on her head that had a delicate appearance. Well, if she used paper, she'd probably run out of it soon. So without exerting a lot of energy, Naruto swiftly continued dodging. He would have continued, but saw one of the small butterflies which were lit and decided to extinguish it. It was small, but the light in the cave dimmed by a lot. So with another small wind attack he extinguished all the flames. Without light she shouldn't be able to aim at him, and he was very good at sensing chakra, so he should technically have an upper hand. But since he didn't know his enemy's strength or weaknesses he couldn't be sure. The steady stream of paper kunais didn't pause and continued to come at him, and when he had finally decided a direction to strike in, several more kunais whooshed at him from behind. He couldn't see, but he could sense the small layer of chakra that coated each meticulously folded kunai. And he sensed a sudden increase. Alarmed, he pulled out his katana from his scroll and slashed down in a curve, twisting his body. With that he released a huge amount of wind chakra and blew away the kunais. They stopped. He swept his gaze over the dark cave, trying to locate the lady. From the way the orange-haired guy spoke earlier, it seemed that she wouldn't attack him physically. She would only defend, and Naruto had to charge. He suddenly sensed her chakra and whipped in that direction, but just then several more appeared, appearing to surround him. He wasn't worried about being attacked. In fact, that would be easier to handle. He huffed out an exasperated breath. This was annoying. He wasn't used to playing hide and seek with his enemies and drag out battles. He always preferred a quick and violent end. But this lady sure took her time. And also didn't seem to be running out of paper. That was more concerning. Finally he dropped his hand and the tip of his katana clanked with the stone ground. He sensed Deidara and Tobi's chakra perk up, as if they were thinking that he had given up. Naruto scoffed. As if. He made a hand sign and with loud poofs, several of his clones appeared, each with their own katanas. They nodded to the real one and dashed to the figures surrounding him. With one slash they had easily exterminated all the paper clones. So that meant that she wasn't even in the circle. Then where did she go? He dispersed his clones and yawned. Fine. If she was going to drag it, then he wasn't going to run after her. Let her come to him. He sat down heavily where he stood and leaned on his katana, gently stroking his finger along its sharp blade. After a few moments, the voice of the orange-haired guy sounded, "Did you give up already?" Naruto pouted in thought, "Nah. More like it seems she ran away," he said. The other man seemed to breath out heavily. "Can you not find her even in such a small place? Don't you have any skills regarding this?" He would have said more if Naruto hadn't interrupted. "If I wanted I could fill up this whole cave to drag her out, it's just that I won't waste my time and energy doing that." Well, that might have sounded a bit too arrogant, considering how suddenly a chakra appeared above him. He suddenly faltered. He didn't expect her to leave and appear so suddenly, but it didn't matter. Before she could make a move, Naruto swung his blade at her, expecting to slash at her legs. However, his eyes widened when his katana passed through empty air. He whipped his head up and found himself staring at the lady flying above the ground with the help of paper wings. Her legs had vanished, apparently turned to paper. Her face, no, in fact her whole body seemed to me made up paper at the moment. Naruto gaped at her for a moment, trying to understand how exactly she was doing this, but stopped when he realized he wasn't here for that. He jumped a few steps back, but found himself constantly getting attacked with paper shurikens and kunai. She was trying to push him further back, and was also attacking. A good strategy, but not good enough. Like, if someone with a fire affinity showed up, she wouldn't have such an upper hand. Suddenly something clicked in Naruto's mind. He stopped defending and allowed the paper weapons to attack him. But at the last second, he used his katana and struck, sending down a strong wind strike. That annihilated all the weapons in one go, and before the lady could make another move, Naruto repeated his attack and slashed at her. She wasn't fazed, and simply dodged. But Naruto was getting bored and annoyed, and he kept striking. Finally, there came a moment when he grazed her. Well, it wasn't him or his katana which grazed her, but rather the wind strike. So he didn't count it as meeting up the requirement. That moment surely made the onlookers widen their eyes, but only slightly. They had almost regained their unimpressed yet curious demeanor when suddenly out of nowhere another blonde jumped at the paper lady from behind. He wasn't carrying a katana and only pushed the lady. Deidara smirked, understanding the trick behind it. Tobi looked up at him and Deidara explained. He never dispelled all his clones. There was that one hiding in the shadows. Tobi nodded but questioned, "Then how did we never notice the chakra?" Deidara didn't know. The lady, after being lightly pushed, was shocked for a second, but then her expression turned back to the cold, undeterred face. Naruto grinned at her, then turned to the leader. The orange-haired guy had already turned his back, and the lady walked past Naruto, no longer made of paper, and followed him. After reaching the end of the cave, they turned around. The orange-haired guy spoke, "Welcome to the Akatsuki." They turned around again, and were about to leave when Naruto called out, "Wait, what are your names?" At first they didn't reply, and so Toby took matters into his own hands and announced happily, "The leader is Pain and the pretty lady is Conan." The two above-mentioned people exchanged a look and then left in a cloud of smoke. "All right." Naruto got up gleefully, and tucked back his katana into its scroll. He looked up at Deidara and Toby and smiled, "So where's my fancy robe?" Time skip, almost a year later. Team 7, or the remaining Team 7, had been called to the Hokage's office, along with Kakashi. Sasuke and Sakura both wondered why exactly would the Hokage call them. Unless... Since the day Naruto had been exiled, they both had somewhere in their hearts held onto a thread of hope that maybe someday, he would return. Sasuke seemed to be in deep thought and lightly knocked on the door before entering. Salura and Kakashi followed and stood in front the blonde lady. Lady Tsunade signed a few more papers and then neatly stacked them together before looking up. She nodded in acknowledgement and got straight to the point. "It's about Naruto." Sasuke seemed startled. "Wait, did you find him? Is he coming back?" Sakura nodded and looked eagerly at her too. Lady Tsunade seemed a bit confused and narrowed her eyes. She held her hands in front of her face and rested them on the desk. Sorry, but no, that's not the case." The Hokage spoke, deflating the genin's enthusiasm. Kakashi only let out a soft sigh. "As you know, the Anbu we sent after Naruto have gone missing, and we have several unconfirmed theories. Many also include the fact that Naruto might have..." Tsunade trailed off, watching the kids intently. At expected, Sasuke blew up. "What? Naruto would never..." He probably would have said more, but Kakashi rested a heavy palm on his shoulder, reminding him who he was talking to. Sasuke instantly shut up. Sakura decided to continue. "Lady Tsunade, I'm sure you two are well aware that Naruto wouldn't be able to do something like that. Please try to clear such baseless accusations." Tsunade let out a soft breath and leaned back on her chair. "If only they were baseless," she muttered in a low voice. The fact that there was so much blood found and not a single body was still a huge shock to the entire Anbu department. And of course the Hokage was responsible for handling this. But she didn't have a clue what happened. It seemed as if the Anbus were devoured by a nasty creature, not leaving even bones or traces of clothing. Or maybe a vicious battle had been fought and the Anbus had been decimated, their bodies well taken care of. But who would possess such power? No village would want to get onto the bad side of Konoha. Ugh, this was too much stress and workload for one person. Tsunade stopped daydreaming and returned to the matter at hand. Team 7 was staring at her intently, so she coughed and turned all serious once more. "I would like to introduce a new member to your team," she stated. Sakura and Sasuke's eyes widened. "Why exactly?" Sasuke asked, and though his tone wasn't rude, it wasn't polite either. Sakura also stepped up. "Are you doing this to fill up Naruto's place? Doesn't that mean you're basically removing his existence from the Konoha genins?" Of course, Sasuke had had the same thought, he just wished it wasn't true. Ever since Naruto had been exiled, Sasuke had been feeling guilty for the whole thing, because it was his fault. And so he just couldn't tolerate anyone saying anything about Naruto. He had also started speaking a bit more than usual, often surprising others. It was like he had stopped caring for his looks and demeanor. He would lash put at whoever dared to annoy him, and he would say random stuff as well. Truly concerning. Kakashi sighed again, wondering why these dumb kids weren't using their heads or letting Lady Tsunade speak. They should be old enough by now to realize what the word exile means. Naruto had been exiled from the village officially and by the Hokage herself, and so naturally he had fallen from the ranks of a Konoha genin long back. Surprisingly, Lady Tsunade was pretty patient today and allowed the two to vent as much as they wanted before continuing and ignoring them. "So as I was saying, a new team member. I hope you will be nice to each other." She motioned towards the door. As Sasuke turned, he thought angrily, "Nice? Oh, I'll be nice." They turned around and saw the door open to reveal a pale boy with straight black hair and small eyes. He was wearing quite a revealing outfit that made Sasuke and Salura raise their brows, and on his face was the most nicest smile. Although, it looked super fake. Lady Tsunade beckoned him closer and he nodded at her. Lady Tsunade opened her hands and pointed at the boy. "This is Sai." "That's it?" Team 7 sweat dropped. It was at moments like these that Naruto would have dropped ridiculous joke, and thinking about that made Sasuke a bit anxious. He too didn't understand why, but he only felt anxious about stuff related to Naruto. Maybe it was because he was guilty. And he thought Naruto would never forgive him. His thoughts were interrupted when the boy spoke up. "I am Sai. Nice to meet you." He smiled his fake smile again. At this point Sakura wasn't even sure whether it was fake or there was some genuine problem with his expressions. With no one having anything else to say, they decided to take their leave. Kakashi told them to go spend some time with their new team member and introduce him to the other genins while he himself went to take care of some business. Well, they couldn't exactly introduce Sai to others today since almost everyone was out for missions. So they simply walked towards the forest, the river, the training ground. Sai didn't say much along the way, and nor did Sakura and Sasuke. Both were equally wary of this unwelcome member. It was evening and they were walking along the riverbed, when Sai suddenly spoke up from behind. "You don't like me, do you?" His tone was surprisingly very serious and cold compared to the other times he had spoken, and so the two in front turned around to face him. Against the backdrop of the setting sun, Sai's face was dark and expression unclear. After a while of silence, Sasuke spoke up. "No, we don't." Sai seemed to smile, and that was beginning to get on Sasuke's nerves. "Well, it doesn't matter, because I am only here on my master and Hokage's orders. I don't like you either." Sakura got ticked off and she grabbed his collar. "What exactly are you trying to prove, huh? You can never replace Naruto," she said loudly. Sai only just smiled and then grabbed her wrists. His hold was strong and Sakura's grip loosened. "Replace? I'm not here to be jeered at by you guys like him. I'm not here to make a fool of myself. Replace him? I am nothing like that loser." He had suddenly been grabbed again, and this time it was Sasuke. It wouldn't be easy to get out of his hold, so he laughed lightly. Sasuke pushed him to the ground and crouched over him, eyes glaring. Sai huffed out a laugh again, which sounded incredibly fake. "What? Isn't that what you called him? See, I never met him. This is all what you said, ha." "Let go, Sasuke." His tone turned chilly at the end and Sasuke's grip loosened, but not because Sai had forced him to do so, but because his words were too true to be refuted. Sai slowly got up and walked away from them. After maintaining a considerable distance, he smiled and spoke again before walking off. "I'm not a criminal after all." For the past many months, Naruto had been switched between different teams, just to check his compatibility. The worst thing about this was, the Akatsuki didn't really have a hideout. The purple hair lady and the orange hair man, whose names he had learned were Conan and Pain. Some of you may call him Pain, but let's go with Pain here, K, respectively, seemed to have their own hideout somewhere, but they never really. At first he got paired with Sasori, who was actually Deidara's partner, but had been working on something previously. Sasori was ugly. Ugly as hell. He made rackety noises, and old man sounds, and was so deformed it made Naruto gag. But of course, he didn't do anything about it. Their partnership lasted only one mission, in which Naruto didn't get to do anything. "Don't interfere," Sasori had said, before finishing the business. "Hey! I didn't get to do anything." Naruto had tried protesting. "You're new here, so I don't trust your skills." That was all Sasori had said. This old fart could go eat shit and die. After a few months, he landed up with Haiden and Kakuzu. A truly weird pair. Haiden kind of reminded Naruto of Deidara, but he couldn't really decide which one of them was more stupid. Of course, Both of them were quite skilled and Naruto had never imagined that such weird ways off using chakra existed. But even the mission with these two didn't go well. Kakuzu continuously rambled about their low pay, and Haiden cursed at everything around them. "Why are you so pissed?" Naruto had asked, pretty confused. He didn't understand what had happened, but Haiden ignored him and continued grumbling. Later, when they encountered the wealthy merchant that they were supposed to take down, Kakuzu told him specifically not to do anything and just stay back. "But why?" Naruto whined. Haiden smirked at him. "Watch AMD learn, kid." He then proceeded to whip his huge scythe around and slashed at the merchant's arm. He licked his blood, which was kinda gross, but what could Naruto say? He had done something like this on several instances as well. Haiden's methods were quite interesting and Naruto was quick to make mental notes of it. It was pretty satisfying to watch Haiden stab himself and the merchant writhing in agony. As much as he was disliking Haiden's personality, he was actually in awe of his method. But of course, Haiden wouldn't even talk to him, much less tell him about his tricks. "Is it because of me?" he asked. It had been a while they were returning, Haiden was still cussing. But at that question Haiden paused and turned around. His expression was purely pissed. His eyebrows raised more than Naruto had imagined to be possible. "Is it because of you?" "Of fucking course, it's because of you." Haiden had began yelling. Now it was Naruto's turn to raise his brows. Kakuzu simply sighed, as Haiden continued ranting. "It took me so much fucking time to perfect my method. I had to be fucking recruited by them. I fucking lost. And that is how I joined. But you, just a pathetic small fry, had the audacity to come knocking at our apparently super secret organization and you won? Against that lady? And you got accepted? What? The actual fuck?" Now that Haiden mentioned it, it did make some sense, so Naruto simply decided to back off, no point angering this guy. And lastly, he had been paired with Itachi and Kisame. He had looked forward to this one. He had wanted to have a chat about Sasuke with his brother. And he wanted to know about the massacre. But things don't always go quite as planned. This time, they were supposed to be assassinating a rich landlord because another rich landlord wanted this rich landlord's land. The blonde had already given up hope of trying to get some action, so he didn't even bother when Kisame went ahead after flashing them a thumbs up. Itachi didn't even bother moving a muscle. So he had stayed back with Itachi in the fields far away from the guy who was Abutadai's house. Naruto had known why Kisame went alone. It was because the rich landlord was too dumb to have shinobi guards. Kisame could get over with this in an hour, but knowing these people, they like to take their time with killing. Naruto had sat on the ground, under the setting sun, using his newly acquired fancy cloak as protection against the sun. Itachi just stood. He had a straw hat with a bell that wasn't even jingling, and he just stood. After some time of just standing and sitting, they somehow came to the conclusion that Itachi would teach Naruto some kunai tricks. This had excited Naruto, and so he had gladly agreed. He hadn't expected it to be so tough. At first he wasn't able to do anything that the Uchiha did, but Itachi was a patient man. He seemed like that kind of person who would allow others to speak their entire monologue but himself would just nod. Anyway, after some time, the blonde realized that the trick to it had been the wrist. Itachi's wrist and fingers flicked and turned in a very particular manner, and once Naruto grasped it, the trick shots came easy. "You're a fast learner," Itachi had told him. "Not like Sasuke though." Naruto smiled sweetly at the man, expecting some kind of reaction. Itachi looked down on him and gave him a questioning look. "You're quite famous back there in Konoha, you know that, right?" Naruto said in a sweet voice, as if he was asking Itachi to tell him how he won the first place in the running race. Itachi's glare seemed to harden, and Naruto expected him to lash out, but unfortunately just at that moment Kisame returned. "Ho ho. Bonding. I see. He has seemed to be in a good mood, with Samahata bigger than usual. Itachi gave him a nod and they moved out. Another uneventful day with only Naruto learning some cool Uchiha kunai tricks. Today, after a long time, he had seen Tobi again. Tobi had kind of disappeared after Sasori came, and now almost a year later Naruto was glad to be paired up with him. Their sense of humor matched, and Tobi seemed to be quite uninterested in fighting, so this meant that Naruto would finally have a chance to kill enemies. He almost cried of happiness, not really. How come I didn't see you for so long? Where did you go? Naruto asked him as they walked out the Akatsuki gathering cave. It was a stupid name Naruto had come up with for that desolate place. Tobi seemed to cry under his mask. Yua, leader took me with him. Well, that was certainly interesting. Ha! Where? Naruto ventured, because, why would the leader take Tobi? And where? No one really knew where Pain and Konan were from. I don't even know. They just took me to some dark and scary place. He started crying. Naruto laughed and comforted him, but he couldn't help finding this slightly suspicious. So, today we go to a hideout if Orochimaru right? To clean out anything suspicious? Tobi asked. Yeah. More or less. There are slight chances that the snake bastard might be there, but I don't really think so. Naruto replied, stretching his arms over his head. Damn, these cloaks are actually pretty comfortable. Of course, he knew Orochimaru wasn't there at the moment. Kido and Hitomi though it had reduced still met up with him to provide information. Orochimaru had moved out of this particular hideout recently and his minion, that Kabuto was murdering some small-time landlords for money. How pathetic. They had to travel for 2 days, before reaching the hideout. The journey was pretty uneventful, just Naruto and Tobi whipping some reeds around at each, pretending to fight. Tobi asked him a rather unexpected question then, who gave you the katana? Naruto was slightly surprised, because of the way he worded it. He didn't ask where did you get it from, he directly assumed that someone got it for him. But he couldn't really decide whether it was intentional or just a slip of the tongue. Well, it wasn't a big deal, so Naruto replied nonchalantly, oh, a friend gave it to me. Tobi seemed surprised, you have friends? Naruto shot him a look, and Tobi held up his hands, alright. Ha, I was just kidding. Later after some time, Tobi asked again, have you named it? Your katana, I mean. Naruto shook his head, nah, it's pretty pointless. Tobi tilted his head as if to ask, why? So Naruto continued, that's like naming your mask, have you named it? Tobi scratched his head, no. Naruto laughed, and they continued. This time Orochimaru's hideout was in a dense forest, and kind of underground, so Naruto and Tobi had decided that if the entrance was blocked then Tobi would go in and find a way to open it. On the night before reaching the hideout, while the two people stoked the fire, a bright turquoise figure suddenly appeared behind Tobi, scaring the poor guy. Tobi shrieked and fell from the small rock on which he was sitting. Hitomi, what happened? Naruto questioned. Her sudden appearance was weird, but it didn't seem like she brought any bad news. Hitomi grinned a weird smile and handed a small scroll to Naruto, then whispered something in his ear. Tobi tried eavesdropping but failed. Naruto and Hitomi exchanged a look and something shone in the blonde's eyes. His mouth twitched into a lopsided grin. Hitomi flashed him a thumbs up and then vanished as quickly as she had appeared. Tobi creeped closer to him and asked what the hell just happened. Oh. We're going to have some guests. Naruto smiled, the flickering fire casted nasty shadows at his face, and gave him a creepy aura. He then handed Tobi the scroll. The next day, they ran in a formation and nodded to each other, signaling that the area was clear. They could approach. No sign of Orochimaru. Kabuto? No. Any other dash? No. A nod, and they proceeded. Suddenly one of them motioned for them to stop. I sense someone. Orochimaru? No. Someone else. I'll take the rear. Go forward. Agreed. They continued forward. They reached it. The hideout. A stone entrance to a probably huge underground hideout. Of course, only that snake could come up with something like this. Who do you sense? Can you tell their positions? Hey there. A clear loud voice suddenly rang out. The shinobi's eyes widened as they whipped their head around. This can be a genjutsu. Just an illusion. It can't be true. Are you serious? Long time no see. Up here, losers. They whipped their head up and yes, there he was, on one of the highest branches of the tall trees. One of them, however, was confused. He glanced at his other teammates. They seemed to be shocked beyond belief. So, it's him. The boy jumped down and landed neatly in a crouch on the top of the stone entrance. He smiled and waved at them. The ones facing him, too shocked to speak. Suddenly a figure appeared out of nowhere, no, more like from the ground itself, and stood behind him. Their cloaks matched. Done already? The boy asked the figure behind him, who replied with a thumbs up. Just at that second a massive explosion rang out behind them, from the ground. A huge fiery that explosion launched stones and soil everywhere. Amidst this sudden chaos, the kid, now hidden the shadow caused by the explosion, spoke. How are you, Team 7? Already replaced me? Already replaced me? Those words carried with them such a heavy air of disappointment that Sakura felt the immediate need to explain, it's not how you think it is. Naruto only tilted his head, and raised his brows as if asking her to explain then. It's actually. She couldn't bring herself to say anything. After all, what could she say? Sai suddenly spoke up, so this is Naruto. He smiled that fake smile of his. Finding this amusing, Naruto returned a smile, his big wide signature smile, that he used to wear so often back then. But this smile of his was as fake as Sai's, and it sent chills down Sakura's spine. Hello, yes, this is Naruto. Naruto waved a hand from under his coat. Sasuke just stared. He couldn't speak, he couldn't move. His heart was beating fast, as if he was scared. Scared that Naruto would hate him before he could explain. That if he spoke, Naruto would vanish. He didn't want him to go. His sole objective right now was to bring him back. To help him get cleared of all those baseless accusations and false charges. But, what should he say? How should he say? Should he say anything? What if Naruto already hated him so much to the point that he wouldn't even listen to him? These thoughts ran around in a never-ending circle in the Uchiha's mind, and he didn't notice Naruto glancing at him from the corner of his blue eyes. As the former Team 7 stumbled over their words, Kakashi's mind was in alarm. Being a member of the Anbu and a trusted shinobi at the Hokage's side, he was of course well aware of what the robes meant. The Akatsuki recruited him. This was the first time in almost a year that Naruto had been spotted after the Anbu sent to track him were found dead, and he was already a part of a terrorist organization. This information was extremely valuable and had to be reported to the Hokage immediately, but looking at the situation at hand, it didn't seem that he would get any chance to do so, so all he could try was to make sure they leave here alive. Finally, Sasuke seemed to have made up his mind to say something. Just when he looked up and locked eyes with Naruto, about to speak, Kakashi gave the order for them to jump back and maintain distance. Sasuke jumped back rather unwillingly and sent a glare to his sensei. Kakashi only signaled at them and they knew what to do. As they scampered around in some kind of formation, Naruto mused at the interesting situation at hand. Who was this new kid he had never seen before in Konoha? Where did he come from? Was this some kind of strategy? Kakashi actually taught them? Wow! Unexpected development. Growth. Very nice, very nice. He was still crouching and so nudged at Tobi's leg, telling him to check this out, because it's gonna be interesting. Toby broke a small thin branch with a single leaf on it from a nearby tree and waved it around, bored, waiting for an attack. Now! Kakashi said, and Sai held out a brush and scroll and with a few strokes created a long snake that jumped out of the scroll and headed straight for the masked man next to the blonde. Both were quite surprised and Toby held out his small branch in an attempt to defend himself, making Team 7 almost sure that they got him. What they didn't expect was that the snake would pass right through him. They were shocked. What kind of jutsu dash? But Sai wasn't done yet. He immediately whipped up a drawing of several huge dogs that leapt out and charged straight to the robed duo. The masked man let out a scared yelp as the dogs once again passed right through him. Meanwhile, without even exerting much effort, Naruto had killed the snake and dogs with some wind-infused shurikens. He held up his chin in his palm and looked down disdainfully. "TSK, TSK. That was honestly pretty pathetic," he said, and he looped a kunai around his finger and played with it. Sai's face darkened. He gripped his brush and scroll and clenched his teeth. Never had anyone dared say such things about his jutsu. Also, he was frustrated at that masked man. Just what kind of jutsu allowed every attack to pass right through him? What's up with that masked man? Sakura asked in disbelief to Kakashi. Kakashi didn't respond, and Sasuke charged. "If jutsus don't work at you, how about this?" He growled, and unveiled his Sharingan. He was sure that he could at least cast a small genjutsu at this freak. He had never expected to hear those words though. He's got the same eyes as Itachi. Close. Close. Don't want to get trapped in some kinda genjutsu like Deidara. Toby yelled and closed his only visible eye, even covering it with a hand. Naruto realized what he said and smacked his head. "You idiot." It wasn't harsh, rather, it was more like a sigh. He turned to look at Sasuke. He had frozen onto the spot, his Sharingan gone. "What did you just say?" he asked softly, and before Naruto could speak he yelled once again. "What did you just say? Itachi? You?" Before he could yell more, Kakashi clamped his mouth shut. "I'll tell you later," Kakashi told him softly. Sasuke's eyes widened even more, and he slowly turned towards his sensei, "You." Kakashi sighed as he knew this brat was about to throw a tantrum after this. He motioned towards the robed figures and said, "Later." They turned back to see Naruto simply sitting there, with a hand on his cheek as he watched them. Sakura nodded to Kakashi and ran towards the enemies. Instead of attacking head-on, she threw a punch at the ground in front of the entrance. Although her attack wasn't as strong as Lady Tsunade yet, it was still much more stronger than normal and managed to send up cracks through the entrance. Naruto seemed surprised and he jumped up, sitting on the branch of a tree high up. Meanwhile, his teammate fell as the building crumbled. Sasuke ran to it and attempted to capture the masked man. What they didn't expect was for the masked man to disappear. Sasuke turned around cautiously and he clenched his teeth when he heard Naruto laughing at him from up. He whipped his head up towards Naruto and locked eyes with him. Naruto waved and pointed towards the ground near his feet. Sasuke looked down only to see the man crawling from the ground. But there was no hole. Where did he come from? With a surprised yelp, Sasuke stomped on the man. The masked man also yelped and went underground once again. After a few seconds he appeared not far off, and this time Sakura tried to punch him, but he dodged once again, yelling. They continued to play this weird game of whack-a-mole for a while, and finally the masked man jumped up and stood next to Naruto, successfully evading Sasuke's shurikens. Alright. This is boring. What are you guys doing here?" Naruto asked finally, rolling his eyes at his teammate who was crying at how mean Konoha shinobis were. "We should be the one asking you that," Sakura shouted back. Sasuke almost groaned out loud. What makes her think that Naruto would answer her? Why does she always have to go against him? Naruto simply raised his eyebrows and replied back coolly, "Well, I asked first." Kakashi held back Sakura and spoke up, obviously the same reason as you. Really? You were here to have tea with Orochimaru as well? Naruto asked innocently, and his partner seemed to choke as he furiously expressed his confusion through vivid hand gestures. Sai smiled, is that why you blew his hideout up? Because you were here to have tea. Naruto tched and expressed his annoyance by rolling his eyes several times. Kakashi finally replied, I suppose we both understand what we're here for. The masked man spoke up as well, could have said that earlier. This conversation made absolutely no sense. Naruto, come back. Sasuke blurted out, and everyone stopped and turned to stare at him. Ah shit. Sasuke's mind blanked as he carefully tried to figure out his next words. Naruto suddenly jumped down and walked up to him. He tilted his head and looked at Sasuke for a good while. Then pointed to him and asked the rest of the team, is he Sasuke? Or did you accidentally pick up a clone or something? Sasuke glared at the blonde, who let out a laugh. Well, that glare definitely is Sasuke's. After all, only I have the honor of being glared at by the last Uchiha, no? He smiled, his eyes glinting. Not good. Not good at all. Sasuke, speak. Seriously, Naruto, come back. I'll tell them that it wasn't your fault, Sasuke started, but was almost immediately interrupted. Naruto got scared, and held up a finger. He then started speaking in a low voice so that only Sasuke could hear. The others weren't making any move, and were on guard. Listen up, Sasuke. I never said I wanted your help. I don't need it, alright? You can apologize all you want. It doesn't matter now. I don't want to go back anyway. When did Konoha ever treat me right? Why should I go back? Remember, the day I go back to Konoha is the day I destroy it. Understand? He patted Sasuke's shoulder and walked away. Sasuke simply stood frozen in shock and repeated those words. The day I go back to Konoha is the day I destroy it. The day I go back to Konoha is the day I destroy it. The day I go back. Sasuke. A girl's voice rang out, snapping him out of his reverie. They're gone. Sasuke said in a low voice, looking blankly at the empty space on the branches. Yes. And we're lucky they weren't trying to kill us. Kakashi nodded. Why though? He knows he's almost like a fugitive at this point. Why would he allow us to meet him and even let us go? We can easily arrange an army of Anbis, Sai spoke up, trying to make sense of the situation but stopped when Kakashi shook his head. Don't underestimate that organization. You are such an idiot. Naruto reprimanded Tobi. What was the meaning of saying Itachi and Deidara's name, huh? Might as well have said your name. Tony sighed behind him dejectedly, sorry. They ran and jumped and weaved through the dense forests and Tobi spoke up once again, wasn't that Kakashi? The copy ninja. Naruto mmed, in acknowledgement, and Tobi continued, then how come he didn't use his Sharingan on me? Naruto shrugged. I dunno man, it's his Sharingan, he does what he wants with it I guess. Even Sasuke has Sharingan. Did he use it? It was after he spoke that he remembered that Sasuke had indeed used his Sharingan, so this question was kind of stupid. Tobi pondered on that for a while and finally said, it isn't his. Naruto slowed down, It wasn't normal for Tobi to say something even partly serious, but for just a second, Naruto had caught wind of extreme seriousness and a hint of deep voice. He didn't say anything of course and continued smiling amiably. He isn't an Uchiha. So of course it isn't his. Tobi said after much consideration. You're right. Who knows, maybe after Itachi killed all the Uchihas Kakashi borrowed 1 inch. Tobi cut him off, almost sounding annoyed. That's not how it works. Do you really don't know anything about the great copy ninja? Even though he taught you? Well damn. Someone's pissed. Naruto held up his hands in surrender. Ahaha, alright. I'll admit, I don't really know much about him except for the fact that he's a closet pervert. Ha ha ha. Truth be told, Naruto remembered reading a scroll on information about Kakashi back during the academy days. But he never really found anything interesting, and unfortunately he had pretty much discarded most of that information from his mind. Just because it wasn't interesting, huh? Oh god, please not now. I'm already regretting it and dying from shame. Toby seemed to be shocked for a moment before shaking his head, and so they continued traveling. Didn't look like Toby was going to tell him. Suddenly a few words of warning flashed through Naruto's mind. Don't you think he's a bit fishy? Lady Tsunade and Anbu spoke up from outside the door. I am busy, alright? The Hokage yelled from the other side. She was already rather pissed at the pile of papers on her desk every goddamn day. She couldn't even have a proper drink. Plus the discussions with the new Kazekage. I'm extremely sorry, but it's Kakashi. The Anbu said again, hoping that this would quell the Hokage's anger. It seemed that this worked, as after a few seconds, she spoke up, let him come. A few seconds later, Kakashi was standing in front of Tsunade as he briefly explained the matter at hand. Ideally, the Hokage is supposed to be calm and composed even in the most terrible situations and lead the village with utmost sincerity. But, Lady Tsunade was not exactly calm. What? The Akatsuki? Why? That brat? I should have known. How dare he? She yelled. Kakashi tried to calm her down but then stepped back when she flipped the table. Shizune. She called out to her assistant, take care of the paperwork, I have some matters to discuss. She stormed out of the room, and Kakashi followed slowly while awkwardly apologizing to Shizune, who would have to take care of this mess. Lady Tsunade wasted no time in calling a meeting of the elders and Danzo, who headed an important section of the Anbu. The Hokage was always the first in command of the Anbu and Danzo was the second. Hence, an important figure. What is this, Tsunade? The elder lady spoke up. Tsunade shot her a glare and raised her arms to her sides on the couch. Naruto joined the Akatsuki. Tsunade spoke coldly, wanting to get straight to the point and gauge at their reactions. The elder sir, who had just raised the cup of tea to his lips, choked and started coughing. The lady blinked several times and tilted her head. Danzo shook his head. A while passed and then the lady elder spoke, excuse me? Without missing a beat, Tsunade repeated, Naruto. I know. Then why'd you ask? Silence ensued. What are your plans, Lady Tsunade? Danzo asked quietly from the corner where he was standing. Tsunade thought for a while. We aren't sure why he joined them. She said slowly, unsure. What else? Of course, he joined out of anger. The male elder sat his cup down forcefully. What's there to be angry about? The lady shot an angry glare at the man. Tsunade brought down her arms and rubbed her temples. Alright. We don't know much about Akatsuki right now. All we know is that they exist and are made up of the most dangerous criminals out there. We also know that Naruto has joined. We don't know what their intentions are. Tsunade tapped a finger on the table, enunciating every word. What about the hideout? Danzo asked suddenly. Destroyed. Tsunade said, receiving sighs of relief from the elders. With a smirk, she added, by Naruto. Why? The male elder asked. Maybe the Akatsuki are not on good terms with him. Tsunade shrugged. Can we use this as some kind of opportunity? The lady said slowly. How exactly? Tsunade inquired. Can we use Orochimaru as a bait? The lady tried to explain, but couldn't help but sound unsure. I'm sure the Akatsuki are far more skilled in these things. It won't be tough for them to track down that snake. They probably don't give a shit even if we captured him first. Tsunade sighed. This conversation was going absolutely nowhere. Danzo then said, "Should we dispatch more Anbu? To keep an eye." Tsunade cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Last time your Anbu couldn't even track Naruto properly." Danzo and the Anbu outside gulped, embarrassment crawling onto their faces. Another round of awkward silence. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose. What was the point of this discussion? She got up and left. Only one solution came to her mind. They had to wait and see what exactly the Akatsuki were after. Only then could they hope to come to a solution. She was on her way to the Hokage office when she noticed a black figure waiting for her in front of the door. Sasuke Uchiha. The guy who caused the most trouble. She sighed and would have ignored him if he didn't speak. "Are you going to kill him?" he said in a low voice. Tsunade froze. "Kill? That's way too harsh, kid." She turned on her heels and glared down at him. He was staring at her with that expressionless face of his. "No," she told him curtly. "Then what are you going to do? Figure out what exactly the Akatsuki wants." She didn't understand why she was telling him all this and answering his questions. But it wasn't a top secret anyway. It was a no-brainer for anyone with average IQ that you need to know your enemy before you make a move. How are you going to do that? Sasuke wasn't going to let her go so easily. She narrowed her eyes at him, but the Uchiha didn't even flinch. He continued, staring at her. Anyone with even a little bit of academy training would know that such missions are carried out by the Anbu. "I'm sure you are not dumb, and so basically, are you telling me that you want to spy on him?" Sasuke finally lowered his eyes, and now stared at the wall behind her. Talking that as a yes, Tsunade rolled her eyes. She wanted to tell him no, but she knew he wouldn't stop pressing the matter. He would keep on annoying her. So all she could do was be extremely rude about it. "Haven't you caused enough problems already? You do know that all this wouldn't have had happened if you hadn't run off to that goddamn snake." Tsunade spoke harshly, making Sasuke clench his fists. I know. Sasuke repeated angrily. "That's exactly why I want to do that. I want to do something good. I want to make up for my mistakes dash. Then fucking stay out of it." Tsunade was not having his bullshit. She snarled and left, slamming and locking the door behind her. She sat down and stared at the neat piles on her new table. Shizune had cleared out the basic and unimportant ones, and now these leftover stacks were the important ones, more or less. There was a bright red new folder on her desk right in the center. Tsunade picked it up with no interest, and flipped through it. Ah, of course. Negotiations with the Kazekage. He was just a kid. And from what Tsunade had heard, it was Naruto who had suppressed the San's Jinchuriki. This was a hunch, but Tsunade couldn't help feeling that maybe Naruto had influenced him somehow. But why would he? She tried to reason with herself. Ugh. So much tension. She opened a drawer and searched for a while, smiling as her hand found the smooth bottle hidden at the back. She happily brought out the small bottle of sake that she had snuck in last night and began sipping it, hoping to get rid of the stress for a while. "Do you guys have a cave fetish or what?" Naruto spoke boldly, unafraid of the bigger members around him who threw him looks. They were meeting up at another random cave somewhere around the Sand village. How many caves does this group own? Do they even own them? Did they make them? So many questions. Walking with his hands behind his head, Naruto snuck glances at the people gathered here today. For the first time since he joined, the Akatsuki actually met up in real life. They had previously always used projections, which made it easier for everyone to attend. At first Naruto wasn't allowed, but a few missions later he was taught the weird jutsu. "You didn't have any mission today?" Kisame asked Kakuzu. Kakuzu shook his head. Hayden spotted Naruto and suddenly called put to him. "Hey, brat." Naruto turned his head around and looked at Hayden. Deidara smirked. "So you do consider yourself a brat, huh?" Naruto shot him a look as Haiden approached, resting his scythe on his shoulder. Heard you and this fellow, he had pointed at Toby, ran into some Konoha shinobis? Itachi glanced at them and decided to eavesdrop. Naruto nodded, predicting his next words. Why the hell did you let him go? Haiden spoke irritably. Naruto shrugged. They were strong. I dunno, ask him. He shifted the question to Toby. A confused Toby now became the object of interest and he sweated as he contemplated his answers. Yeah, they were strong. Toby stuttered, holding his hands in front of his face as if they could protect him from Haiden's glare. Stop with the bullshit. I seriously don't understand why the leader doesn't have a problem with you both letting your enemies go alive. Haiden scowled in annoyance. Suddenly, two projections showed up at the back of the cave. Of course. Pain and Conan never showed up in real life, except for that one time when they came to test Naruto. Tisk, Haiden turned away from the two, and faced the leader. His voice glitched when he spoke and his eyes seemed to glow. Today, we are here to discuss some very important matters. Such as, our goal. Judging from the tone of Haiden's, Naruto presumed that the leader had never really talked about the goal of the organization before. Everyone seemed kinda interested right now, and so Pain continued, these villages and the Kages think that they are invincible. They fight against each other to display their superiority. In recent years all they have done is put on a facade of civil relationships. It is the smaller villages that are stuck in between their wars that suffer the most. Akatsuki stands for the dawn of a new world. We will show them their place. A while passed, a few nodded their heads and others raised their brows. Well, that's kinda vague. Naruto whispered to Deidara. Suddenly, Conan stepped forward. We will attack them one by one. And crush them. Show them how it feels. Deidara whispered back, this is totally not what I signed up for. Toby poked his head in between, and whispered as well, but you'll get to blow up many villages. Deidara, totally what I signed up for. The meeting then ended, and everyone was told that they would soon be receiving orders about the strategies. Are we going to discuss the strategy or what? Naruto walked up to Itachi. For some reason he felt like he should probably get on this man's good side. He never looked at him straight in the eyes, and so his eyes kept wandering here and there, while Itachi spoke, most probably. Good. Even a few words is progress. Toby came up to him and started blabbering something to Itachi, before suddenly remembering something. He poked Itachi and said slowly but clearly, by the way, is Sasuke Uchiha your brother by any chance? Kisame slapped the back of his head and said, are you dense? Of course. Toby rubbed his head as a tear pooled in his eye, ow, I was just wondering why he is still alive. Somehow, something about that statement seemed a bit off to the blonde, almost as if. Was Toby trying to incite him? Naruto eyed him curiously, and then shifted his gaze to Itachi. Aw shit. He seemed pissed. Although his face didn't change much, and still seemed expressionless, Naruto could still feel the danger radiating off of him. He almost expected him to say or do something to Toby, but was kind of surprised that even after the intense glaring, Itachi turned around and left. Kisame laughed a bit, something about making Sasuke stronger. Stronger? For what? I want to kill a certain someone. Naruto's eyes slightly widened. Was Itachi planning something like that? Kurama? Surprised? Do you think so too? Why wouldn't I? Doesn't he look like the suicidal type anyway? No, that's not how you come to conclusions. I can feel them suicide vibes. Talking to this fox was a complete waste of time. I can hear ya kit. Ugh. Pain stood at the window and watched the rain fall heavily on the streets below. It wasn't unusual at all, and the villagers were quite used to it. After all, it was the village hidden in the rain. A woman stepped out of the shadows behind him and spoke slowly, attacking the villages. Pain turned around and nodded at her. His orders. Conan let out a small oomph and said, "Why do we have to change our plans?" A deep laughter echoed in the empty space, stopping Conan from speaking any further. A man in orange man materialized into existence from the shadows. The single eye turned into a Sharingan and stared at Pain. He spoke up, his voice deep, "Any problem, Conan?" Conan faltered, but then spoke anyway, "Why do we have to change our plans? Didn't you say that we needed all Jinchuriki for the destruction of the hidden leaf? Isn't that what we were working for?" The man stepped forward and stood near the window as well, staring at the heavy downpour. He tilted his head and listened to the chatter of the common folk. They were so oblivious, selling porridge to workers and laughing at petty things. They had no idea who had built them this safe haven, who had saved them. All they knew and did was pray to their savior. Pitiful. He turned around and grinned, but of course, the other two couldn't see it. "We don't need them." Conan raised her brows. "Why waste time collecting all those stupid Jinchuriki and extract their powers slowly when we already have the strongest of them?" "The new kid," Pain said. "The new kid." The man agreed. Conan, still dubious, voiced her concerns. "Are you saying that the nine-tailed fox is stronger than all the tailed beasts together?" "Of course not," the man scoffed, "but he is pretty strong. Also, why waste time? I still don't understand. Why are we ignoring the plan we had worked so hard on?" Conan said loudly. "Who are you to tell is what to do?" The man snorted at her words. "Who am I? Ha, who am I? Who do you think I am, Conan?" Despite his aggressive tone, Pain didn't move an inch, nor did Conan back down. "Just someone with who is apparently showing us the way after Yahiko's death." "Ha! Who do you think founded this organization? Who do you think gave you the power to still be able to see your dear Yahiko like this?" He motioned towards Pain, who stood still, staring at the man. Conan paused. The latter part was a will spot for both her and Nagito, the man who hid behind the identity of Pain, doing his best to put Yahiko's plans into motion. "Yahiko founded Akatsuki," Conan said, her tone firm. The man didn't back down for a while, but eventually started laughing in a low voice and stepped back, holding his chin under his mask. Just do as I say, okay? If you still want to see your dear Yahiko," he said, and turned away from her, unaware of the fact that she would rather not see Yahiko like this. Yahiko was not like this. He was not some kind of killing machine. He had dreams. But she clenched her fists. Those damn hidden villages. They thought of themselves as high and mighty and didn't think twice before crushing someone else's life just to walk one step ahead. It was all their fault. They killed Yahiko. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She'd go along with this. As long as they avenged Yahiko, everything could be sacrificed. That's what she and Nagito agreed on after all. The man disappeared through the walls yet again, leaving the two alone in the dark room. From the highest point in the entire village, they could see the small crack in the clouds. A small sunray eventually glowed brighter, lighting up the damp town. "We owe him," Pain said, and walked past Conan, and she nodded, following after him. He stood there in the shadows of a cave, a green creature appearing behind him. "Zetsu," he greeted, turning around and facing the green creature. Zetsu emerged from the ground, his half-black and white face surrounded by two plant-like claw thingies. "Toby," he spoke in a low voice, "what is the meaning of this?" Toby chuckled and sat down. "What? Does the old man have a problem?" he asked, resting his chin on his palm. Zetsu shifted behind him and narrowed his eyes. "Are you going to betray him after coming so far?" "What if I did?" "Ha! What if? That Madara can barely move, alright? He literally leeches off chakra from some random I don't even know what exactly." Here Zetsu corrected him, the ghetto statue. Toby nodded, ah yes, what was it again? Zetsu, the husk of the 10 tails. Toby nodded vigorously as if he just remembered and completely agreed with whatever Zetsu was saying. Right. So anyways, Madara is leeching off of a weird statue thingy, and wants me to collect all the Jinchuriki to awaken the 10 tails so he can destroy all the villages. But... He paused, his eyes narrowing at Zetsu as he glanced over his back. What if I'm not interested? Zetsu only had one reply to that, but he saved you. Toby turned back around, oh yeah, that was very nice of him. Say thanks to him from me. Zetsu, so you are betraying us. Toby, I practically control this organization. The shinobi world isn't strong enough to hold out against the full powers of a Jinchuriki. Also, my goal is destroying Konoha, not the world. If today I back out of Madara's plans, he cannot come after me, unless he finds someone else. He's basically dead right now. So, to answer your question, yes, I'm betraying you. He looked back at the creature, who was now wearing a deep scowl on his face. Toby, you better think again. Yeah, no. You can't do anything without me or... Wow, really? Thanks. Toby, he saved. Oh yeah, did I mention that was very nice of him? Finally, Zetsu stopped. He slowly started sinking back into the ground as he said, you are going to regret this. I regret many things. Toby whispered softly after Zetsu fully disappeared. With a sigh he got up and exited the cave. Jiraiya sat down heavily on the only sofa in the Hokage's office. He looked around dejectedly at the small space as he waited for Tsunade to come. What a dingy place. Can't believe they wanted him to take over. Ha! He couldn't sit in such a stifling room doing shit ton of paperwork even if they offered him a mountain of sake. Nope. Not at all. Never. He was in the midst of shaking his head when the door was forced open with a loud bang, causing Jiraiya to let out a small yelp. Tsunade strode into the office, without as Yuke as glancing at him. Do you always treat your doors like this? Jiraiya asked. Tsunade sat down on her chair and folded her arms, looking up at Jiraiya, like what? Like you treat me? Jiraiya replied and stood up as well. He took a seat in front of Tsunade by pulling up the sofa in front of her desk. Tsunade raised a brow, if you mean I hit them. Jiraiya grinned, exactly. A moment passed, but Tsunade remained unamused. Finally, pinching the bridge of her nose, she spoke up in a serious tone, alright you old fart, we are here to discuss some extremely important matters. Jiraiya sat up straight. Okay. About what? Naruto. Jiraiya's eyes widened. He had heard about Naruto's exile, but he was on certain missions far from Konoha for all this time. He only knew some specifics, and though he did not approve of it, he did not have power to bring him back or anything. Did you find him? Last time, all he had heard was that the Anbis had been annihilated. So they hadn't been able to track Naruto at all, and somehow that brat completely vanished from their spying radars. Tsunade shook her head, it's not just found. She looked up at the toad sage who unlike her was showing each and every sign of aging. He joined the Akatsuki. What? Jiraiya abruptly stood up, shaking the whole desk. A few leaves of paper floated down silently. He did what now? Tsunade rubbed her palms and then her face, she groaned out, I know you heard. But why would he do that? Jiraiya asked like an idiot. Maybe it was the shock, maybe he was just very stupid. After a second of Tsunade not responding he realized the answer himself, oh right. It's because you all decided to blame him for something that he didn't even do and... I had no choice. Tsunade yelled, frowning deeply. She was tired of being blamed for this. For being blamed for everything. Just because she's the Hokage doesn't mean everything is her fault. It wasn't like she wanted to exile Naruto. It wasn't like she hadn't talked to the elders about it. It wasn't like she didn't do her best to scrape the idea of a goddamn execution. But of course, no one would believe her, especially because that discussion took place completely verbally, with absolutely no proof. No choice. Well damned Tsunade, maybe he had no choice as well then. Jiraiya wasn't exactly shouting now, but he was talking very loudly. Loudly enough for the Anbis outside to wince at them. Tsunade was enraged. Excuse me. What the fuck? Jiraiya stepped aside and away from the table, trying not to blow up. Tsunade followed soon and they were now standing face to face away from the table, near the sofa. What the fuck indeed? You and the elders have practically doomed Konoha. What if the Nine Tails escapes? What if the Akatsuki capture the Nine Tails? If it wasn't your fault, then are you just going to shrug off all the responsibilities? This may not be your fault, but you will have to be the one to take responsibility. Every single word seemed to strike a nerve and soon Tsunade was trembling with rage. She could have punched him and kicked him, but what good will that do? No matter how much she disagrees, his words carried weight. And Ahe hated him for this. She hated him for making so much sense. Biting down on her anger, she scowled. Fine, I take responsibility. What are you going to about it? What are you going to do about the whole Nine Tails situation? Even though she wanted to throw him out of the window, she also knew that the one with most experience regarding the Akatsuki and the Nine Tails was him. No matter how infuriating his presence, she needed him if she wanted to do something about the situation at hand. Jiraiya was still scowling, but not as deeply as before. Not sure. I have been tracking the Akatsuki for a while, but recently their activities have decreased. So it won't be very easy. I will have to think of something. Tsunade sighed, when suddenly a very random idea popped into her head. Hey, you taught him right? Jiraiya looked up at her, scowl gone as he was deep in thought. Naruto? Yeah. Did you teach him the summoning too? Tsunade asked. It wasn't a bad guess, considering how many masters and senseis teach their students particular summonings. And Jiraiya was known as the Toad Sage, so it made sense that he would teach the Toad summonings to his students. Jiraiya nodded, and had understood her plans. You want me to ask them, right? Tsunade nodded. Yes, it's a strong jutsu and he should have used it at least once for whatever purpose. I'm sure they can tell you about his whereabouts and recent activities, right? Nodding at her words, Jiraiya shifted to the more spacious part of the office and biting down on his thumb called a small toad. A small orange toad with a young and smooth skin appeared into existence. Kamagi. Jiraiya nodded. This little guy was new but extremely reliable, so it was more than possible for him to have been summoned by Naruto. Also, this guy always seemed to have more information than other frogs and toads. He said it was just gossips going round. Kamagi looked up with a pleasant smile, his eyes landing on Tsunade. Hello pretty lady, how are you? Kamagi, I have important questions to ask. Jiraiya said a little woefully. How come he straight up ignored someone as glorious as himself, the Toad Sage? Kamagi, with the same pleasant smile croaked, Shoot boss, I'll do my best. Have any of you been summoned by Naruto recently? Tsunade asked. Almost immediately the little toad shook his head vigorously. Absolutely not, ma'am. What? Jiraiya was quite stunned. How can someone not need to use summonings while working in criminal organization? It was one of the most natural things for a ninja to do. Or had Naruto not done so because he anticipated this? That Jiraiya would sniff him out like this? Boss, I'm completely serious and sure. That blonde boy has not summoned any of us for more than a year now. Kamagi said, noticing the atmosphere grow heavier. So, you don't know anything about his location? Tsunade spoke slowly. Kamagi shook his head yet again. Nope. And I dare say, maybe you won't be able to force any of us to him as well. Jiraiya grew even more confused. Why? Kamagi tried to explain. Well, it's kinda like, he hasn't summoned us for so long, and we have kinda grown distant. Is that even an excuse? Tsunade cut him off harshly, causing the toad to sweat. At least he would have. Okay, he kinda blocked us. Jiraiya's face fell. What do you mean blocked? Kamagi rolled his eyes. See, I'm not the highest ranking toad, so I don't have a lot of idea regarding all this, but it's kinda like he cut off his chakra connections with us, at the moment. It's extremely unfair because he can still summon us, but we cannot go to him. Even if you send us. Oh. Shit. Tsunade and Jiraiya exchanged a look. A whole new problem to deal with. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.